and welcome back to another Blu-ray review. I'm currently suffering from a heavy sinus/hay fever attack, so bear with me if my voice is a little rough and ragged throughout this thing. But we're going to talk about the first film in the new Eureka set, Hopping Mad, the Mr. Vampire sequels. And this is an interesting one as we first get into this release and these movies, because this is my first experience with the Mr. Vampire films. And if anyone knows me fairly well, they'll know I hate starting a series in the middle, or whatever that case may be. For me, it's you start at the beginning, you work your way through chronologically, release order, But the really petty thing about this is, once Eureka announced this, I was like, okay, great, more Hong Kong cinema. I'm all about it. Like, I'm raring to go. And obviously, they've previously released Mr. Vampire, which came out in 1985, directed by Ricky Lau. I've not seen it. I was going to buy it. I was going to watch it before this release came out, but I wanted it with the slipcover. And I looked on eBay. No one had it with the slipcover. I looked again on eBay. I was refreshing that thing every week. Nothing. And then finally someone was selling it with the slipcover for £80. £80. Ain't happening. I love slipcovers. I love my collection, but £80 is criminal. I think that markup is just ridiculous. So if anyone has Mr. Vampire with the slipcover, and you're not precious about slipcovers, and you'd be willing to donate yours, or even sell it to me for a decent price, a few quid, £5. £5 would be my limit for a slipcover. I mean, that's really talking about a piece of card. That alone is quite ridiculous, actually, but I'd like it to match and go with the collection, And I like my Hong Kong releases from Eureka with the slipcovers. What can I say? I'm a creature of habit. I'm a creature of collecting. And I'm just loving these releases, and I just would like them to match. And then I can watch Mr. Vampire. I mean, it's ridiculous, really, but I don't know. Maybe I should just bought it and then try to get the slipcover later. I don't know. But regardless, I was aware that these films are not some spanning saga that follows one through-line story. And as I'm finding with Hong Kong movies, even when I really first started getting into them, any Hong Kong sequel is usually very loose, at best. And so I was aware of the fact that Mr. Vampire 2 was not the continuation, but another iteration of this genre of hopping vampires. So the title of this release, Hopping Mad, I think is a pretty fun one. And I have no doubt that these films are quote-unquote mad. The kind of horror comedy genre is one that I quite enjoy, and having kind of dipped my toes in a little bit with The Dead and the Deadly last year, and also being a huge fan of the Chinese Ghost Story trilogy, which isn't too much on the comedy, but just the imagination, the creativity. That's what I'm hoping to kind of get from these films, with that dose of, I'll leave it in for free, humor. So we're going to start with the first of all, we start with number 2. I'll be talking about the sequel, Mr. Vampire 2, or Vampire, I think it's called Vampire Family. That's the translated title from the Cantonese title of the movie. So the first one here is, again, the second one, just kind of frame that in my mind, Vampire Family. And what I'm going to do with this is the same thing I did with the Creeping Horror release, and that is essentially review each of the films in a separate video. And what I'm actually going to do here is, I'm not going to listen to the commentaries, I'm not going to go with all the extras. You're going to get a review of each of these 4 movies, which do comprise, I should say, Mr. Vampire 2, Mr. Vampire 3, Mr. Vampire Saga 4, and Vampire vs. Vampire. So I'll do a review for each film, and then at the end I'll do a review of the set, including the commentaries and some of the on-disc extras, the booklet, all that kind of stuff. I enjoy that format when there's a lot of movies in there to talk about. I don't want to cram all into one video and kind of overbloat the thing. So, Vampire Family. And again, I think that it would be fun for me to not kind of go in with a sense of like, okay, here's all the context, and it would be nice for me just to talk about my reaction to the movie. And having not seen the third one or the fourth one or the fifth one, and I think there's even, there's some debate over whether that's even the right order or whatever. This is the only film I've seen in the series, Mr. Vampire 2. Okay, so I don't know what to expect moving forward. I don't know what to expect from the previous film. It's all brand new uncharted territory for me. So, what are my thoughts on the film without knowing too much about the behind the scenes stuff or even a lot about some of the actors? Although I can tell now that Lam Ching-ying, who plays Dr. Lam Ching-ying in the film, is going to be one of my new favorites, I think, in Hong Kong movies, because I kind of liked him in Dead and the Deadly. He was playing an older kind of character, but he's really cool in this one, and he really has a great on-screen presence. And so again, I'm really enjoying just latching onto some of these names and getting excited for seeing them in future movies. I think Richard Ng is in the third film. That gets me excited because I really liked him in Magnificent Warriors. So the Hong Kong, the Luke Ryan Hong Kong cinematic universe is opening up wide, and I'm kind of I've got the board on the wall, and I'm kind of circling around the wire and kind of pinning it in different places and kind of spreading out my knowledge. And I really enjoy that stuff. That's part of watching films, reading up about them, that I really enjoy. Anyway, so the film itself, Mr. Vampire 2, I prefer the title Vampire Family. We have these three guys at the beginning. One is a kind of archaeologist, and he has his two bumbling assistants. They're very much incompetent at doing pretty much anything, it seems like. And they're excavating this site, and it's set in present day as well. And that's one thing I really liked about it, I think. So they're excavating this site, and they find a cave, and they go inside, and they find this perfectly preserved family who have these paper talismans over their faces, and they're kind of these just frozen in time, perfectly preserved corpses. So a male adult, a female adult, and a young boy. And so they very eagerly bring the bodies back to the lab, to the archaeologists, the scientists' lab, and shit goes crazy from there, basically. So first and foremost, the young boy wakes up, does a runner, and then back at the lab, we have one of the assistants played by... I knew his name before I started this, and it's gone. Ricky Lau is the director, and the actor's name is... Maybe it's in the booklet, and I don't have to stop filming, and I can just look in the booklet, and I can get this actor's name, because he was a fairly good part of this film, I thought. He was a very, very animated kind of performance from... Oh, here we go. So the cast listing for Mr. Vampire 2... Billy Lau. That's right. So Ricky Lau is the director. Billy Lau plays Chicken. I didn't know his name was Chicken. And the professor is played by Chung Fat. But yeah, Billy Lau, he's one of the assistants, and he's left alone with the two adult vampires. Of course, he doesn't realize they're vampires. And this sequence, I have to say, really set the tone for me for what this film was going to be in terms of the humor, again, the creativity and tone, I guess. The tone of the humor and the tone of the creativity was set from this opening set piece where he's looking at the talisman over the woman's face, and he kind of removes it to kind of go study what it means. And one thing I liked about the film is that he's then reading from a book, and he kind of is basically giving us the kind of, why does the word escape me? It's the classic, I was going to say conjecture. It's not conjecture, it's... holy shit, why is this very basic film term completely left my head? Exposition. So he's given this exposition through this book, and he's reading about, and it basically gives you the rules and the kind of the history of what these vampires are and so on and so forth. But of course she wakes up because the piece of paper, the talisman, has been removed. And so now this female vampire, this hopping vampire, See, I didn't, when I knew it was like the hopping vampire subgenre, I didn't realize they were literally like just only hopping around, which is very comedic. And so it's not like the vampire's gonna run at you and just bite you and just, eviscerate you like instantly. They're hopping around. So it's on one hand funny, but on the other hand, it kind of, it gives the filmmakers this creative license to kind of really draw out and do some really fun creative stuff with humans, being chased by these things. Although later on in the film they do get kind of crazy with the hopping and they're jumping all over this long highway, but going from car top to car top. Anyway, so we have this young assistant, and this whole sequence with him and the female vampire is just so funny. I was just laughing so much, and just there's little gags, and there's stuff on wires, and then the male vampire wakes up, and this is where it just kicks into high gear. And then one of the talismans has been torn, so now he's frantically switching back and forth between the male and the female vampire, sticking the talisman to each one just to give himself a breather, but then the other one's coming after him. And it was just, I thought, super fun, and I was just all in on the film from the get-go once that scene had kind of run its course. I thought it was brilliant. And then we go to the young vampire boy. And this is where the film really clicked in for me. I loved this whole, and I to be fair, I looked online on Letterboxd after I watched the film. Most people don't rate this film very highly. You're talking 2 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd, 2.5 stars out of 5. Very middling kind of reviews. I have to say, I loved this film. If this was the only film in the release, I'd be happy. Like, this was so entertaining. But when we get to the young vampire boy and the film suddenly goes kind of E.T., and he ends up in the shed of this sweet young girl who finds him and befriends him and leaves out some fruit for her. She leaves out like a red apple and a green apple, and you just see him take the red apple. Just these little sight gags that I thought were so fun. But this little vampire boy, I love the actor who played him. Like, there's just something fun about him, and I don't know, I've really enjoyed his performance a lot. It was really endearing. And just the story of this literal vampire child, just meeting these very innocent, unassuming kids, because the girl has a brother, and then their local friends come in and they meet the little vampire in the closet and everything. And it was just so sweet. But once he kind of becomes assimilated into their friend group, without the adults knowing, of course, there's this montage that is one of the funniest things I've seen in years. I was laughing out loud so much. This sequence gave me so much joy. Like, I don't really laugh out loud that much. I recently watched the James Franco, Bryan Cranston comedy, Why Him? Not a great film. There's some very funny stuff in it. Not all of it landed for me. But I didn't really laugh out loud at anything. It was funny. I recognized that it was funny. I enjoyed it, and I thought it passed the time. It was entertaining enough. But this film made me laugh out loud, which is fairly difficult to get me to. And this montage has this young vampire boy out with all the kids, and there's this cheesy pop song playing, and he's like, he's taking care of bullies in the playground. They're going off into the city. It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I would love a whole movie, Vampire Boy's Day Off. Like, it was just it, and then like he kind of disappears for us. They're like, "Where's he gone?" And he's just like licking his lips. He's just had some a top up from the local blood bank. I just thought that made the film for me. I thought it was brilliant. So now you have like the professor and his assistants. They're trying to kind of salvage the situation because the vampires have awoken and they're causing havoc and stuff. And then, like halfway through the film, we're introduced to Lam Ching Ying, who's this doctor who has a familiarity with these vampires, and his assistant who works at his store with him, played by Yuan Bu, and his girlfriend who is Moon Lee. Like these like fairly well-known figures of at that time, Hong Kong cinema in the 1980s, suddenly just appearing halfway through the film. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'd forgotten. I knew I'd read that he was in one of them, but Yuan Bu for me is just, I love the guy. And I think that he can offer more than just the incredible martial arts skill that he has. I think he's a really funny actor, and he has a good comedic sensibility, which he shows in this film too. But Lam Ching-ying, I'm fairly new to his performances, but I thought he was really fun in this. Like he's kind of a hard ass in this, but it's very impressive that he pulls off the kind of badass vibe that he's got going on in this film, considering the fact he has a giant unibrow. Like this thing that makes people look, almost unanimously uncool. He still pulls it off. He rocks that unibrow. And he has got I don't know if he's like, see the term like Taoist priest or like Taoist monk springs to mind. I'm not sure if that's what he's supposed to be, but he basically has the tools to combat these hopping vampires. And so it becomes almost a different movie at that point. And there's this weird kind of chemistry between them where, or friction, I should say, rather than chemistry, where Yuen Biu is going out with his daughter. And there's a very strange sequence where he's bragging about sleeping with his daughter, which is just very strange and kind of funny for the wrong reasons, I think. And so they're on the case now. They're going after the vampires and trying to track them down because the assistant, he kind of has a bite on his arm and he comes in to the doctor, Lam Ching-ying, and that's the trail that leads them to the vampires. And then everything does kind of converge very nicely towards the end in the third act. But one thing I have to say is towards the end, there's a sequence where the young boy is in the little girl's house and he's in the closet hiding, and his parents arrive and he starts howling for them. And it pulled my heart out. Like I was just like, holy shit, I'm actually feeling sad for this little boy. Maybe it's the paternal kind of instinct in me, but I wanted him to be protected, but I also recognized that these vampires were causing hell and needed to be stopped by the good guys. And I suddenly realized I don't want them to be stopped, and it was this weird kind of moral quandary that kind of popped up in my head where I was like, no, I want them to live happily ever after as a vampire family, or at least let the boy stay, and the young girl, she really wants him to stay and she doesn't want him to get taken away or anything. And yeah, it really pulled at the heartstrings, I think. And it was the howling that really, it was a primal thing to me, like your child calling out to you. And I just thought that part of the film really nailed it for me. I don't know. It was just a very silly film that actually drew me in emotionally. Not that I was going to roll a tear or anything, but it got me inside. I was like, I'm really invested in this young kid, even though he's a vampire, and you kind of know that it's a doomed life, regardless. But still, there's another big comedy set piece where this stuff that slows people down gets kind of blown up in the air and everyone's moving slowly. And at first I was dying laughing, and then it got real old real quick. But I loved the dedication of the actors. I mean, like Yuen Biu's in there, Moon Lee's in there, and Lam Ching-ying and the vampires, and everyone's moving slowly. So there is like a lot of humor to be found in that kind of thing. But it wore on a bit for me, I think. It's probably, if I could give the film any criticism, it'd be that the joke outstayed its welcome a little bit there. But it also kind of, they leaned into it so hard that it also became funny again. And there's some good, quasi-action stuff in here. Not so much as you would expect from like some of the heavy-hitting action films I've talked about in recent videos on the channel from Hong Kong, released by Eureka. But there's some good, there's good kind of physical comedy and like slapstick stuff, but there's also some cool kind of stunts as well that go on during the film. But the comedy of it, I think, is really well done and really well pitched, and I think the subtitles conveyed some of the jokes quite well. There's a really fun kind of in-joke where Lam Ching-ying is like talking about his master Sammo Hung, who fought the dead and the deadly and Mr. Vampire, and he had encounters with the spooky kind. You're referencing all these films that had been made in previous years. I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, I understand that reference. I find that meta joke funny. But the slow motion kind of sequence, the fact that they're kind of miming it out in slow motion as opposed to it being in real slow motion made it funnier. But there are some shots I could tell that it was actual slow motion, because when they're jumping up and down very slowly, you can't really mimic that realistically enough. Anyway, I think it's a super fun film. I really enjoyed it, and the modern setting helped it for me. I always enjoy it when it's a modern setting, I suppose. So I'm intrigued to see. I'm sure a couple of the other films on the set are probably set 100 years ago or something like that. But that's pretty much it. I thought it was a well done film. Not amazing, but I loved it. I don't know. I just the cinematography was really nice. Shot well. Had some fun music in there that was very much of the time of the 80s and stuff. And there's definitely some interesting stuff going on where the young girl who finds the vampire boy in her shed, she's kind of has her eye on the TV at one point at the dinner table, and they're talking about these immigrant children who are being stopped coming into Hong Kong. And her father makes this kind of offhand comment about the little snake children who don't see the light of day. And so she thinks that this vampire in her shed is an immigrant. And I just thought, God, that's a bit, there's a loaded kind of subtext to that, isn't there? But, there's a bit of humor to it, but at the same time kind of makes you think, well, that's, it's a very interesting point of the film, I thought. And I'm intrigued to hear maybe more about that in the commentary, perhaps. And I'm really excited now to hear the commentary, to hear more context about some of the actors that I'm not as familiar with, and the film itself. All I know is that the first Mr. Vampire film came out the year before and was quite successful, and so they rolled through with the sequel, which is not a direct continuation, but kind of, another iteration, as I said earlier. So that's pretty much it. Mr. Vampire 2, Vampire Family. I had an absolute blast with this film. I thought it was so much fun. And I was really invested with this young boy, really, mainly at the end. And credit to the actors who played the vampires, including the young boy, but even the two adults, because they have no dialogue. It's all grunting and groaning and lots of hopping. But I thought that they were great, and they that's kind of they're the main focus of the film. Really, it all revolves around them and different characters and stuff. But yeah, I thought that was some pretty good stuff. The whole like Yuen Bu and Lam Ching Ying and him being the kind of the reluctant potential father-in-law to Yuen Bu and everything. It gave those two characters more than just like he's his assistant. Like I liked that it gave them a bit more kind of friction throughout that kind of portion of the film that they're in. So that was really good. I thought it's a well put together film, very funny. Really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to check out the other three. But I feel like this will probably be my favorite, and one that I really want to go back to. I will say I showed Connie the first sequence with the assistant and the two vampires, which I just thought was hysterical, and she was kind of like, didn't quite get it. Then I showed her the montage with the vampire boy going out on his kind of big day out, and she thought, oh, actually that was pretty funny. And she's like, if the whole movie was like that, I'd be more interested. But yeah, I had a blast with this one. Really, really enjoyed it. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for the next 3 reviews, or 4 I suppose technically, for Mr. Vampire 3, Mr. Vampire Saga 4, and Vampire vs. Vampire. Then my entire thoughts of the whole set, thoughts on the commentaries and the other extras on the disc. And there was even some extended scenes for Mr. Vampire 2, which I had to flick through, and I'll talk about that in more depth later on. But there is an extended version of that montage with the vampire boy, which I was so thrilled to watch. We'll talk about that a little bit later down the line. But that's it for now. If you've seen the film, let me know what you think, and what your thoughts are on the other Mr. Vampire films. If you have any, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And I'll see you in the next one.